Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I say gentlemen because we got a guest again tonight.
Who's that?
Repeat offender, Mr. David Shaw.
Hey,
is
hello.
gracing us with his presence again.
All right, listen, I've been listening to Star Talk. It's a cool podcast because Craig's made me a podcast listener. And Neil deGrasse himself has co-hosts, and he typically has comedians as a part of the co-host. So, yeah. You were an impulsive last-second addition to this particular episode, right?
Right, I'm in.
So you got to give us some comedic relief on this one, all right?
I literally just knocked on the door.
I know, literally. Things just happen that way.
Yeah, David was in town. We told him we were recording, and he showed up.
He literally showed up just at the window right when we were going to push the record buttons, and so we're like, hey, jump on with us, right?
So here we are.
With another edition of Through with Therapist's Eyes. This is Chris Gazdick, Craig Graves, and what is your name?
David Shaw.
Mr. David Shaw. You will remember him from what episode, Craig? That was...
Parenting.
I'll have to look it up, but it was parenting with David Shaw. David's got a good story. If you haven't heard it, I'd go check that episode out. Let me find which one that was.
You'll tell us in a second.
About an hour and a half of it, you'd be good to go.
We invite you to see the world through the lens of a real mental health and substance abuse therapist. To create emotional growth through the medium of this podcast, please do be aware it's not the delivery of therapy service in any way. Feedback and discussion on throughatherapist'seyes.com. Dave and Craig, this is the human emotional experience. Let's figure this thing out together, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got an interesting thing here I wanted to put out. We haven't done, Craig, a diagnostic show. You got that episode, by the way, yet?
I'm working on it, man.
Oh, okay.
I'll have it in a minute. I'll let you know when I got it.
Quick. Anyway, we haven't done a diagnostic show, David, in a little while.
Right.
And, so we need to cover from time to time specific things because people get kind of confused and scared, really, about the whole mental health field. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like,
absolutely.
Oh, man, I don't want to get diagnosed. You guys are going to call me crazy. You know, we did a show, Craig, on why we do diagnoses and why they're important. So actually, I'd refer to the listener to that one too, because we spent some time kind of talking about the validity of that and why that is important. You remember why that is important? You remember kind of how we came to with that?
Yeah, I think what we said in that show was it's good to have a diagnosis because then you can treat it. All right, you know what to do to treat the problem once you find out what it is.
Yeah, and honestly, people. And it's probably good for this show with schizophrenia, man, to realize, when people are dealing with such a dramatic reality and a change in their life, when they figure out like what this is, it's actually a great relief. I mean, you can imagine as we go down kind of thinking about what is schizophrenia and that type of thing, man, it starts happening to you. You know, David, it starts coming out when you're like 18, 17, 16, 20 years old, man. And such a significant thing like schizophrenia is, can you imagine how freaked out you're going to be when you start wondering if what I'm looking at and seeing is real or not? Like,
Right.
And then what happens when someone comes in and says, oh yeah, well, that's this.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like something crazy that I don't even know what is.
That's right. Now, banana is yellow, right?
Yeah, right. Banana is yellow. Was that a comic thing?
I don't know.
What do you know about schizophrenia, man? What is the going perception in your now? And just to qualify for the audience, you don't really know anything about schizophrenia and deep knowledge on mental health and this type of thing. You just kind of jumped in the house literally before we took the mics on and jumped in, right?
That's correct. That's correct. We're street walking, and you caught me on the street. That's the street. No, I don't know. I think you use the word perception, right? I think it's that. I think it's. And I'm a technologist in general, so I look at it siloing things, and you happen to silo your psyche in such a way that they're individual personas, right? Persons in one, right? And maybe some can talk to each other, maybe some can't. But in general, from what I understand, that they are independent, separate kind of personas and psyches that take opportunities of the body. That's my high level kind of understanding.
Interesting. Yeah, you're talking about dissociative identity disorder.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, you're talking about something kind of actually totally different.
Okay.
They've done movies on that. Craig, we're going to have to write that one down and do a show on DID as well. That's kind of actually a bit controversial in the whole field as it is. Some people, professionals, kind of poo-poo and say, "Oh, that doesn't exist." There was a great movie about that. Oh man, we're gonna have to look that up and figure that out. But yeah, that's
Fight Club.
Actually, what is Fight Club? Fight Club, I don't know that movie quite so well, actually, but there is some stuff there to that.
He conjured up Brad Pitt, if you will, as an alter ego to make him go do things. Yeah. He actually saw them as a physical being, and that's how I understand the movie.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, he was kind of a geeky guy, right? Like, I think he was a techie like us.
That's right.
Yeah.
So stop now.
So he developed a badass to get him out of his shell.
About the same age, I believe.
Yeah, I know, right?
Greg's going to come out with another personality here in a little bit.
He's the Spartan boy.
Yeah, he is. He is a Spartan. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know that movie well enough to know, but there is something significant with that. But the movie I'm thinking about really kind of did disassociative identities, where you have whole different personalities involved in the way that you operate. Like, you'll lose time, and it's legit. Like, it's real. You know, people will. Well, there's just all kinds of examples of amazing facts with that. I had an ex-colleague of mine that really kind of got into that and started working with it. And but no, this is something totally different. Not different personas. It's really kind of mostly highlighted. You'd think of it. Well, Craig, let me bounce to you. He struck out. What is schizophrenia in your brain anyway as well?
I was wondering if you were going to ask me, man. I'm kind of feeling left out here.
Hey,
Shaw shows up and you forget about me.
Striked out, buddy. Striked out.
I'm used to 2, not 3. This is awesome.
You know, schizophrenia, I don't want to downplay any of the other conditions that we've talked about, especially depression and those kind of things. But from my understanding of schizophrenia, it's a scary thing, because you're like, my understanding is you see things that aren't there, you hallucinate, you hear voices, and that's some scary stuff to me, right? Mm-hmm. Not that I'm scared of people with schizophrenia, but
people are, and that's one of the main reasons for this show, to take the illusion out of that a little bit, so that we're not afraid of these people. Because definitely, Craig, that's a part of what happens with the myths and stereotypes. People have been demonized, and we'll go into that in time, I think. But yeah, that's part of our purpose, really.
Okay, well, good. But that's kind of the way I think about schizophrenia, man.
So are we talking about paranoia? I guess I'm still not gathering it yet.
David,
so.
Craig's killing it, and you just bombed, dude.
That's okay. I'm the street guy. So
yeah.
So I'm allowed that.
That's true. I'm allowed that. That was comedic, wasn't it?
I think so.
That's pretty good.
Small stuff.
We're warming up.
Small steps.
We're warming up. It is, Craig. You're right, man. It's one of the main things, you know, with schizophrenia that we look for and that we look at. It's majorly a problem with reality testing. You have hallucinations. Is I think it's fair to say the primary characteristic of this, and so when you're talking about psychotic experience, that's what you're talking about. I am experiencing something with my sensory systems, and I don't know if it's freaking really real or it's not. Mm-hmm. And it is scary to begin experiencing stuff when you really don't know if it's really happening or if it's just absolutely a complete figment of your brain. Can you imagine that?
Well, I mean, a little bit, right? We're talking about PTSD, in my case, right? Certain trigger things that bring me back to some old history into a real situation.
Yeah,
and getting confused.
Yeah, absolutely. It's maybe you call it a kissing cousin there. You're right, because you're not sure if it's really happening, but you're really living it and you're in it. But it's even like there's no trigger. It's just like there is a body in front of me,
right?
A full-fledged body, or I feel a spider crawling all over my body when I'm in bed. Like it's crazy. And then the delusions as well are very vivid and very real. Like you really believe the FBI is kind of coming and monitoring you and watching you and absolutely ready to take you out, right? So you got hallucinations and you got delusions, and there's very big distinction there, right? So hallucinations are kind of your sensory experiences doing stuff that you don't know if it really is doing. Olfactory with your smell, your tactile with your feeling, like the spiders and bugs and this type of thing. Your visual with your seeing shapes, shape-shifting figures, whole bodies, that type of thing. And what did I leave out? Auditory, right? With your hearing voices, and there's sometimes even like a command style. This is where you get people hearing voices telling you to go do something. Sometimes that ain't such a pretty thing.
Yeah.
Right? But sometimes it's just real basic too. You know, it's not like some, always a demon that you're looking at or a demon that's coming at you to tell. But there's a lot of religiosity that can develop with this type of thing. So yeah, that's the primary thing is delusions and hallucinations. Delusions are very, like, it's funny because when you get psychotic, you have like a nugget of truth, and then it just builds around that truth and builds around that truth and builds around, so that you got all these added beliefs and added thoughts that kind of just crush you in, and then you don't know what's up and down, when you get delusions. So
could it be a phase? Like, could you go in and out of it? Like, for example, in our area, in the southern North Carolina area, we had an issue with a manhunt for a killer, right? And you start thinking, hey, look, is this guy around the corner? They're looking for 24 hours. This guy had murdered somebody. He's being looked for. And are you over vigilant at that point? Where's the demark of, hey, maybe you went too far or not? I'm locked and loaded at the house. I'm paranoid walking around. I'm looking at every little thing behind the bush now. I got my kids with me. I mean, at what point am I went too far on that?
It's interesting. Yeah, the answer to can it be a phase is no. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. This is not something that phases in and phases out. It's a few things in our field, where once this is identified, it's kind of identified, and you kind of got it. It's kind of like diabetes. It's not a phase of your life that you kind of come in and then it goes away. Now, symptomatically, it can kind of get better and kind of come in and out. So in that regard, yeah. As a matter of fact, it's a good time for my qualifier. I didn't. Craig, you asked me if I'm. Would you ask me before the mics come on
if you were an expert on the topic?
Remember the definition of an expert? You remember that?
Well, you read 3 books that somebody else hadn't.
Something close, man. Knowing one more thing than someone else in the room,
guy,
man. That makes you an expert.
You're an expert compared to me.
So in that regard, I guess I am.
But you are the expert at the table. We'll say
at the table, I guess you'd say. Yeah, and I got to say, you know what? Not really, because I really don't work with this quite so much, and so I don't get a lot of repetition. And part of that is because these are folks that kind of get stuck into tough spots, in that there's a lot of poverty with this. There's a lot of life struggle with this. These are the people that were kind of commissioned into the insane asylums, is what we used to do to a certain extent, and so I don't really get to see a whole lot of this type of thing in managed care, insurance based therapy, which is kind of what I've been kind of doing for several years now. But when I was in the mental health center, oh yeah. When I was in the psych hospitals, oh yeah. When I was in crisis work, oh yeah. I've absolutely, dude. Matter of fact, it occurs to me, there's one third. Every therapist has these, like, I don't know what to do with this moment type thing, and it was one of these ones where I was in crisis work years and years and years ago up in West Virginia, and we get this call, and we go into on scene, and I guess it was this guy's house or whatever. This dude was freaking out, and alcohol things going on. The police were called. I don't know. He was disorderly, disruptive, something or whatever, and they called me, little dude, David. I'm like probably 22 years old. I'm just fresh out of undergrad school, wide-eyed. They call me in.
Got this.
Yeah, I got this. So we're walking in with the police, and we go up the stairs, creepy stairs, and the dude's sitting in there, and there's a cop talking, and he looks over at me. He's like, "I'm glad you're here." I said, "Okay, I'm glad I'm here too. What do you need?"
He said he was glad you were here?
Yeah.
That's a sign.
I'm here to help.
Yeah, I'm here to help. And long and short of it is, this dude was pissed, man, and he was upset with somebody, and he was just being disruptive, and they were trying to figure out if they needed to take him in, if he needed.
But he was schizophrenic.
I think he may have been. I never got a chance to diagnose him, but he was certainly in that domain, if you will. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm sitting there talking to him, and he starts getting fired up, and we was talking about alcohol, and he's probably a little buzzed up, and things were going on, and the police were trying to make their decision, and he takes these AA chips, throws them across the room. I slightly take 3 steps backward, and I don't even remember how that night ended because the police kind of took over, man. So no, I'm not an expert, but I've definitely been in situations with psychotic folks, and it can be scary. It's kind of a scary thing because they're not necessarily cognition enough to be able to rationally interact with you at times.
Well, let's go back to what you said in the beginning of the show, then, should we? Why shouldn't we be afraid of a person like that?
Because they can be treated.
But if they're not in treatment, they could potentially be dangerous. Is that true?
Is that true? Yeah. Yeah. And that's why it develops into a little bit of a societal issue, and we want to touch base on what we do with treatment because, it's a societal issue when people have more significant and serious mental illnesses. What do we do and how do we handle that? Remember we talked about suicidal and homicidal ideations?
Yeah, the moral courage episode, right?
No, homicidal and suicidal.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I do remember, yeah.
You listen to all our shows. You remember that episode, right?
I can, yeah.
You've listened to all of them a couple times, right?
A couple times.
So in that show, one of the things we talked about, Craig, is what do we do? What do we do as a society to kind of deal with this as a major issue? Because you can't just take somebody in custody and shove them in a facility and keep them there. It's like they have their civil liberties as a bona fide citizen and adult, but when they're untreated, they can be homicidal. Now, let me make a big distinction here too. I think it's a fair thing to say that we look a lot at like mass murders and what's going on in the world and stuff today. Dude, this is not a big part of the mass murder problem that we have. Mental health needs to be treated. I'm not saying it's not a factor by far. I think it's a big factor. But I think at times people will, because of that fear and misunderstanding, kind of feel like, oh, this guy's been identified as a mental health patient. We got to protect society from them. That ain't true. That's far from the truth. And we'll look at a list here. Hopefully, we get into this and see some real quite famous people that have had this thing going on to kind of misprove that a little bit. So no, honestly, I don't think we need to be fearful. I think we need to be aware, dude. We need to be aware of people that are needing treatment and figure out the most appropriate way to provide that. Because there's a lot of times they need treatment, they got poverty, and they ain't got insurance, and they ain't getting treated.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
So let me buzz through. We're doing, dang, man, it's already 17. So what is schizophrenia? The hallucinations and stuff is a big deal. Disorganized thought. They could be catatonic, which is kind of, losing your mobility even a little bit. So there's some serious brain stuff that's kind of going on with this. You got something that called negative symptoms that we look out for, where you're kind of numb or sort of expressionless, or real sort of negative based depression types experiences. Their functioning level, a big thing that we look for is they used to be doing stuff in school and grade school, grammar school, and moving up to middle school and high school, and they start getting mature and they start developing. But then when this starts to pop out and manifest, man, their functioning just backslides. They're not able to be real independent. They certainly don't move up into independent living and adult very well, and they need help. So there's a fundamental digression in their ability to function, and it has to be around for like 6 months. So this isn't like you kind of said, David, a flash in the pan. It's something that just hits and whatever. So, but diagnostics with this are difficult, and clinicians need to be real mindful. And there's kind of a lot of things that we look at. We're ruling out other things as well. We're looking at bipolar disorder and schizoaffective, which is a combination of bipolar and schizophrenia. So stuff gets complicated, with the picture. So by far, if you have anybody ever that and lots of people do know people, because everybody's got their crazy aunt, that are struggling quite possibly with psychotic experience, go get help and go get this thing figured out.
There are different levels of schizophrenia. I mean, it should be pretty. You said it was hard to diagnose. Why is it hard to diagnose?
I'm not saying it's hard to diagnose. I'm saying it's complicated if you don't know what you're looking for and how to rule things out, how to figure out what the psychotic episodes.
What are the symptoms that are not hallucinations and hearing voices and stuff like that? That seems pretty obvious. I'm hearing voices. So you got schizophrenia, buddy.
Well, not necessarily. Again, you can have David. You were talking about PTSD.
Yeah.
Right. You flash back, you start hearing stuff and recalling stuff, and
like now.
Yeah.
Like I can have things that come back to me, and it's real and fresh and smell and everything, as if I was there.
Right.
And it was 30 years ago.
Right.
Wow, really?
And sometimes people have what's called a brief psychotic experience, where this psychosis and whatever pops out and then comes back and it goes away. And I'm actually, to be honest with you, I don't understand brief psychotic experience very well at all. But bipolar, you can go into, when we talked about bipolar, you would have psychotic experience with that. Major depression. You can get so severely depressed that you start having psychotic experience.
Okay.
So
I thought that those kind of experiences were unique to schizophrenia. That's not the case.
That is not the case.
Okay, I didn't think about PTSD being that way, but I do remember reading a book. I read tons of stuff, and Eric Greitens wrote a book called Resilience. Resilience? Yeah. And he was an ex-SEAL, and one of his mates came home and went back into society after being deployed in the conflict. I don't know if the guy was. I don't think it said, but he had been deployed, and he came home, got out of his truck, and like you said, David, he went back to that spot, and he was convinced the sniper was going to shoot him. So he just laid on the ground beside his truck for hours.
That's right.
Until he was finally able to move on the ground, belly down, whatever, into his home. And then, he and Greiton started exchanging letters, and that's what the book's about. But this guy evidently had experienced some kind of episode where he thought he was being targeted, but it was just PTSD.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right, that makes sense then.
Yeah, there are several reasons. Listen, you know what I tell people? You remember my quote, Craig? I'll throw it out there again. I learned this very early on in my career. A guy named Bob Music up at Valley Comprehensive Community Mental Health Center. Love you, Bob, and thank you for this, because I've quoted him several times. There is no difference between us and the people that we serve in mental health, and these were pretty, difficult people in the mental health center at the time. It's 25 years ago. He says there's no difference between us and the people that we serve, no thicker than a piece of dental floss. And David, I first heard him say that, and I was like young and dumb, thinking, "Y'all done lost your marbles, man. That can't be true." You know how true that is?
Pretty true,
right? Go 3 days without sleep, and you will be psychotic.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Interrogation testing.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's purposely done to
Good
people.
Stuff.
Yeah. You ever been interrogated, David?
Perhaps.
Craig, I don't know if that's comic relief or if that's real. I'm having reality testing as we speak.
We'll go with comic relief, but it could go either way.
That's right.
Yeah. There are subtypes to this thing. A lot of times you hear paranoid ideation, paranoid schizophrenia. You hear disorganized schizophrenia, catatonic schizophrenia, and residual schizophrenia, which actually, Craig, David, you said does this come and go. I didn't really fully realize, I think, as much really over the course of a life cycle that schizophrenia can kind of really residually come and go so much in the course of somebody's life. And that was actually, Craig, to your expert question, I mean, I didn't know that, frankly, until I kind of used Google on this one, by the way, a little bit more than I typically do. I did a little bit more kind of goosing up what I know on this with that stuff, which there are some cool links that looks like we're not going to really have a lot of time to get to, but they're on the show notes for that reason. So there are those different subtypes of.
Did you say what caused it? Do we know what causes it?
Your parents had sex.
You were born.
Yep.
But there is some genetics behind it too, right?
There are some what?
Genetics.
That's what I mean by that.
Well, I mean, yeah. You're just saying.
No, really, genetically factor. Yeah. What I mean by that, I kind of tell people that in my office sometimes too. To be honest with you, because if you begin to realize, like, this is. I'm glad you asked that. This is not like bad parenting, for crying out loud.
No, it's definitely more than that going on.
This is not. Really, it's not even head injury. Traumatic brain injuries are different. So the fact of the matter is, you will find a genetic predisposition to this. It's part of what I relied on my show. I got it on my screen right now. Schizophrenia is a chronic and severe neurological brain disorder estimated in 2014 to affect 1.1% of the population, or approximately, holy cow though, right? 2.6 million adults in the United States.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
2.6 million folks. And that's only 1.1% of our population.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty low percentage, but
Right.
That means a lot of folks are affected by this.
Well, we're going to talk about John Nash Jr. in a second.
Yeah.
His son suffered from the same condition.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No
Did
kidding.
you guys know that? Did you know that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, his son also has the same condition his father had.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of times that's interesting because I wouldn't think you'd have that close of proxemics with genetics, if that's a word. That sounds smart, doesn't it?
It came out.
proxemics with genetics. Anyway, that would be that close in relationship. I think I'd be interested to see some statistics on how that really works, if that's a true statement. But I think you're going to be a little bit more widespread. It wouldn't be that common.
Yeah.
But that's definitely the reason why.
Okay.
It's just a brain disorder, unfortunately.
But
that is waiting to pop out.
There's no test, MRI or whatever, that doctors can use to look at an individual and say, oh yeah, you're going to be schizophrenic someday or whatever. No genes or
DNA, chromosome. No carryover.
It's interesting that I think we just mapped the whole elliptical structure of all that stuff not too long ago, and I think as we learn more about that, even so far as like with what are some of the things with disorders that people have, like mental retardation and Down syndrome and chromosomal stuff. I mean, I think that we're learning so much about that. But yeah, as of right now, dude, I don't think we have any clue. Nothing there. Let's normalize this thing we haven't already. What do you guys remember about A Beautiful Mind? The audience, you guys out there listening across the country and the world, had an assignment. I hope they followed up with that, man. Watch The Beautiful Mind before this show.
Yeah, and if you hadn't seen that, turn this thing off and go watch it and come back. I don't
Would
want
be a
to
good
be
idea.
a spoiler alert or anything like that for you guys. A great movie, though. I think Russell Crowe won a Golden Globe for Best Actor for that role. Russell Crowe plays John Nash Jr., who was basically a genius. He won a bunch of mathematics awards. I think he was a professor at Harvard, wasn't he?
They made him an honorary professor per the movie.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was a professor. But anyhow, he suffered from schizophrenia. And in his mind, he was working for the government and breaking codes and doing all this stuff, and it was totally stuff that he was imagining, that he was hallucinating,
conjured up.
Yeah.
And a friend as well.
Yeah.
So he had an imaginary friend.
Yeah, imaginary friend. Yeah, his buddy. I can't remember the guy's name in the movie now, but yeah, he had a buddy.
And I was going to bring that up, right? Imaginary friends. Does that play along with schizophrenia, or is that something else in addition?
It's something totally different. I think we all had experiences with kind of childhood.
No, this guy was like into his adulthood through the whole movie. Where the movie's based on, if that's true in the movie, I don't know.
As he was teaching,
but this,
he was a roommate.
I think at the end of the movie, he's talking to his friend
as it was a roommate.
Well, and the reason why I'm drawing a distinction is that is not the experience of imaginary friend. Really, A Beautiful Mind did an excellent job at really depicting what can be a very normal life, but in a really distorted manner as his life plays out, and that's very different than an imaginary friend. My little sister, we made fun of her, man. Becky, I love you. We took her imaginary friend and we threw her out the window one day. So sad.
How'd she do?
We were horrible brothers, man. We were horrible. She struggled. She was upset. Yeah. She was upset.
Well, this was in the movie. I mean, back to David's point. This was more than just an imaginary friend.
Exactly.
This was somebody that you thought was real.
Yep.
Right.
Just about throughout the whole motion picture.
Yep.
And then you realized that it was something that he conjured up in his mind too.
Mm-hmm. It was a real live visual series of people, and there was a little kid that was in that movie as well, and then the adult that was his sort of contact and whatnot was the same figure, and it was a figure that he developed a relationship with. And these hallucinations, though not always that vivid with psychosis and whatnot, it's like real. It's as real as you and me sitting here, people have told me. I mean, I'm in therapy session with people and we're talking about this, and I'm like, kind of in my head and even out loud a little bit, I'm kind of like, really? Like, tell me really about that. And they can give me distinct details about what they're seeing. I mean, it's like, wow.
Well, let's go back to that for a second.
Well, before we go, where you want to go? Because I actually have John Nash's thing, and I thought I want to read it real quick.
Well, while we're on the topic,
cool.
You said that you didn't deal with schizophrenia a lot in your office. Where do you get treatment if you have schizophrenia?
Yeah,
And you can come back to that if you want to. I just don't want to lose that point.
No, you know what? And that's why you're here, man. I don't want to lose that. Well, let's go there, because that's a good thing to do. What do we do with treatment? So honestly, back in the day, you ever heard of insane asylums? Here's where you can do some comedic relief, dude.
I'm in.
You're in the asylum?
I am in. We're partners.
Heard of one.
I run a joint.
Hell, he lives at one.
Oh man, they are bad places, people. Man, and back in the 50s and the 40s, 60s, I don't know when we really created those, but we have a place in West Virginia called, what is it? Oh my God, it's been that long? Weston Hospital? I don't know. They're creepy, scary places, a lot of times thought of as like ghost houses now and stuff, and a lot of times they are.
Yeah.
Dude, sadly, before we knew what was going on with mental health, even back when we used to do lobotomies and crazy stuff like that, we would put these guys all and gals all up into a hospital and just lock them down and lock them in. And the poor people that had to work there, it was physically dangerous. Mental health workers would get killed, and we didn't know what we were doing and trying to treat them. It was dangerous. It was scary. It's horrible to think what we did back with the old insane asylums. So that was treatment back then. Drill a freaking hole in the head and hope that makes some impact.
It's an impact. It's an impact.
It's going to make an impact.
Holy cow, that is an impact.
One way or the other.
So we've gotten much better at understanding what's going on and treating it and dealing with stuff like that. So we kind of shut those down. And back when I started my career, it seemed 225 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe less than that, but
Every show it goes up 5 years, so now it's probably around 40 years. 40 years in practice.
Listen, I am going to be straight. I graduated grad school in 1997. I started kind of before then in undergrad school. Do the math, I don't know. But listen, when I started, we started community mental health centers. And that was the idea that we're going to shut these places down and we're going to bring all these guys home and live in our communities, but we're going to support them and wrap around like case management and medication treatment and therapies and, you know, kind of whatever else they need. But you know what happens when we use government dollars for treatment, right?
I have an idea.
Mental health gets shorted.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Short stick.
Absolutely. So we kind of did a good job with that, and we, you know, we worked with it, and that's where I got my start working in those mental health centers. And then we kind of did changes where we shut the mental health centers kind of down to where they don't even deliver any services, and we contract all this stuff out. So honestly, Craig, we identify schizophrenia. So I do see it in my office rarely, you know, bipolar or schizoaffective and this type of thing, particularly when teens are. I'm identifying this sometimes in kids as young as 15 years old. You know, if you can imagine. And so we do therapy. You know, we do medications. We set them up with services if they're indigent, you know, with, you know, some case management, and somebody comes along with them and takes them to doctor's appointments and, you know, and their therapies. And we have programs they go through the day, like day programs. And so they get socialization and they get, you know, they get a lot of support. I wonder if they get as much and good support as we did when we had mental health centers. But, Craig, I think to make a big point with your question there, medication's a big part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, this is one that you really want to treat. However, you remember from the movie, David, what did Mr. Nash do with his medications?
Well, they didn't go down his throat.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, God, what did he do with them? Yeah. Do you remember that from that show? That shocked me.
Yeah.
My stigma as a clinician is that when you got this, you're on medications for life. That's just needs to be. Maybe not.
There's an interesting point. I don't know how far I want to get into it, but it was if that's the thought process and there's no harm, what are we curing?
Oh, we're not curing. We're managing.
What are we managing? I mean, if this
symptoms.
person's not destructive in society, right? I mean, he has an imaginary friend that he believes it's imaginary to me.
Okay,
it's real to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, because if I tie this into gender identity crisis, for example, that's a belief. Mm-hmm. You believe this. I see it. That's not right, but that's what you believe.
Dissociative identity as well.
Is it, or is it not the same?
Mm-hmm.
Right, because you believe.
Oh, it's definitely different.
You see what I'm saying? You believe something, and that's where you're at, right?
Well, where I think you're going with it, which is an interesting point, because yeah, we need treatment for people, particularly that are disruptive, because a lot of times it is disruptive. Let's not belabor that. But yeah, I mean, you know, if you're not disruptive, you know, people, we're going to go through a list here in a little bit of people that, you know, that absolutely are famous that have lived significant lives that, whether they're treated with medications or not, we're helping them. But you'd be surprised. There are people that might be on this list that you'll recognize, right? So you're right. When something's not disruptive to society, I guess I hear you saying, how and what and why do we really need to treat it? Does it need treated? It needs managed, though, for sure.
How do you manage it? I mean, how do you treat it?
Exactly. Medications is I said my stereotype a little bit in my clinical brain, but you're kind of putting a question to that, and I can see. And Mr. Nash is an example. If it's true, by the way, it's a movie, but if it's true, he didn't take medications. That's kind of hard for me to stomach. That's hard for me to process, to be honest with you.
No, I think that is a true statement. I think CBS did an interview with him after the movie was done. And I didn't realize this, but he was killed in a car accident 4 years ago. He and his wife on the way home from the airport in a taxi cab.
Yeah, you told me that tonight.
Yeah, he had been somewhere to accept a prize for some kind of award for excellence in mathematics. He won a Nobel Prize, too, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And they were coming home from the airport, and the cabbie lost control, and he and his wife were killed.
Oh, man.
But it is a fact that he managed this sickness without the use of medications.
Because I think there's a fine line between that genius and crazy, right? And he rode that.
Yeah.
Right? And I think medication took that away from him.
Yeah.
Right? He wasn't the genius at that point.
When you watch the movie, when he's on the medications, he's a zombie. He's sitting at home, he can't do anything, and so he learned how to manage the disease or the sickness without the use of those medications because they zapped him. And he couldn't be the genius that he really was.
And what's interesting in that movie, if it's true again, because it's a movie, I haven't seen a lot of his live stuff. I'm going to read this here, so that'll be interesting. But, in the movie, you remember how he figured out there's, what he's seeing isn't really true? You remember how he came to that conclusion?
I don't remember completely. Why don't you go over
It'll come back to you. So he's living his life, and he's doing his thing, and he's got his contact. What was it, with the FBI or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he suddenly just realizes, like, oh, there's that girl, and that girl never gets older. Well, that can't be. Boom. It blew him out of, like, believing the stuff that he was seeing, because he also then knew at the same time, because these people aren't stupid. They got intelligence. They're struggling with, is this real or is this not? But they're really smart people, as evidenced by Mr. Nash. And it just dawned on him that is a complete inconsistency, that I could no longer rely on those images, because that fact stuck to him, and that girl never got older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You couldn't ignore longer.
No
longer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It just dawned on him, I think. And I think for schizophrenic people, and people for that matter that have other hallucinations and trouble with psychosis, you're lucid through the experiences of this.
Exactly.
Which is why it's so maddening in a sense, because you're like, there ain't no spiders in the bed, but I felt some stuff crawling. It's like...
And that's when I go back to saying, are we into something that we've tapped in the mind and the psyche that we haven't learned how to train? Right? So we're going to med it out of you. And I'm like, hey, how do we train that for the better?
Well,
right? How do we take that to the positive? John Nash, how did you get where you're at? That math was crazy math.
Yeah.
Right? How'd you get there?
Yeah.
Right? We obviously didn't get there with the normal average mind. Right?
Yeah, and
he taps in places we're not normally at.
Right. I don't think science knows that yet. I mean, honestly, like, yeah, your question is fascinating, and I have a geeky science brain to think what can we laser in there, or what can we manipulate in there, or what can we change in your brain or help to I don't know, man. That's some dynamic stuff. Figure it out, and we'll let you out of the insane asylum at home.
I'm working on it. I got a lab at the house.
Can I check this out? Go ahead. Did we answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I was just going to ask you if you had done any look, but I think I know the answer. I think you already said it. How he managed that without medication.
Yeah,
we don't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, honestly, in my brain. So this guy, this is from a website. It's on the page, and I haven't read this, so I'm actually kind of really interested in checking it out, because this is an excellent example of schizophrenia. Is an American mathematician working in differential geometry, game theory. Game theory, how cool is that? And partial differences, differential equations.
Diffie-Q, sorry.
Partial differential equations. Nationally acclaimed Hollywood movie A Beautiful Mind was made, representing Nash's life, and was nominated for 8 Oscars. The movie was based on his mathematical genius and his struggles with schizophrenia. He was often rejected by his classmates and would typically laugh it off with practical jokes and intellectual superiority. He viewed every day, can you imagine that? he viewed everyday life as a little more than disastrous from his scientific work. His work was provided insight into factors that govern chance and decision-making inside complex systems found in daily life. His theories are used in economics, computing, evolution biology, artificial intelligence, holy cow, can't wait till we get that stuff, accounting, computer science, games of skill. Nash was involved in video game development, holy cow. Politics and military theory, serving as the senior research mathematician at Princeton University. During the latter part of his life, he shared the 1994 Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science with game theorists Reinhard Selten and John, I can't even go there, Harsanyi? Hope I did that right. In 2015, he was awarded the Abel Prize for his work on nonlinear partial differential equations. David, can you repeat that?
Nonlinear diffie.
Partial differential equations. Nash was awarded the John von Neumann Theory Prize for his invention of non-cooperative equilibria, now called Nash's equilibria. Between 45 and 96, he published a total of 23 scientific studies. Nash's mental illness first began to manifest in the form of paranoia, his wife later describing his behavior as erratic. Nash seemed to believe that all men who wore red ties were part of communist conspiracy against him. He was admitted to McLean Hospital in April 1959, staying through May of the same year. There he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. That's crazy cool to think what this guy did through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God in 59, I don't know, the insane asylums were about that time, and I guess we did a better job at some facilities than others, because he seems like he was a part of that. What do you think, man? Pretty intelligent guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I think that afforded him a latitude to have different views on things, especially in this mathematics, right? That we can't get into. So yeah, I can see that erratic things of that nature. He's so engulfed in his work, and yeah, I think I've been there. Not that good, but yeah.
There's some interesting people on the list. Did you go through the whole list?
No, I'm going to hit it right now.
We'll share this list out here shortly, or when we publish the show on the show notes. But there's some interesting names on this list. You going to read through it?
Yeah, let's hit it. Let's see how many of you guys recognize these things. These are 20 famous people with schizophrenia.
Some of them are pretty interesting.
Right?
Yeah, some of them you're going to recognize for sure.
Lionel Aldridge, 1941 to 98. Do you know who Lionel was? He is an All-American. What does that mean? Lionel Aldridge was an all-skyline tackle and co-captain of the United States Aggies.
The Utah State
Aggies.
Aggies. That must have been a pre-NFL team or something like that, because this guy's a football player.
What year?
He was drafted in 63 after a standout career at Utah.
NFL was out at that point. Yeah, I don't know what that
It wasn't what it is now, but he
enjoyed an 11-year career in NFL playing for the Green Bay Packers and the San Diego Chargers.
He did play in the NFL, right?
As a Packer, he played a role in 3 straight NFL championships, 65, 66, and 67, and in Packer victories in Super Bowls 1 and 2. Dude had schizophrenia. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I like football, so I spent a little more time on that. But let's see
see if Shaw knows the next one. Sid Barrett. You know who Sid Barrett was, or is?
Sounds familiar.
No, he was. So he passed away in 2006. He was an English artist, songwriter, guitarist, and artist, most notably the founder of the rock band Pink Floyd.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That should make some sense too, right? But that's interesting because this is a creative mind. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Pink Floyd, they did some good stuff. Charles Buddy Bolden, 1877 to 1931. You know this guy?
Bolden? I do not. I've never heard of this. I've never heard of Buddy.
One of the most historic cases of famous schizophrenic people was Buddy Bolden. While there is a great deal of first-hand oral history about Bolden, facts about his life continue to be lost amongst colorful myth. There have been stories outlining that he was a barber by trade or that he was published scandal sheet called The Cricket. However, much of this has been refuted. What is famous about this guy? I don't know. I'm going to move on because
it's interesting because it goes along the same lines here. It says he was a key figure in the development of a New Orleans style of ragtime music or jazz, J-A-S-S, which later came to be known as jazz. So
Oh.
this guy may have invented jazz music, dude.
Holy cow. Okay.
He was referred to as King Bolden and King of Jazz, and his band was a top draw in New Orleans from 1900 until 1907.
I'm glad you kept on with this, man. That's
Yeah, so that's another creative mind, right?
Yeah,
I
man.
love jazz music.
The next one's interesting too. Check this one out. You want to do the honor there, Chris?
Go ahead.
Edward Einstein,
Mm-hmm.
1910 to 1965,
Yep.
famously the son of Albert Einstein. We won't go into his detail. I think that says enough right there.
Einstein.
Yeah, he's Einstein's kid.
Einstein genes.
But again, that's kind of interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
Einstein's one of
absolutely.
the smartest people to ever grace us with his presence.
Zelda Fitzgerald. Was she famous people with schizophrenia, large part due to her fame as the wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald, famous author of The Great Gatsby. Right?
Yeah.
Peter Green. What is he? Founder of the American band Fleetwood Mac. You ever hear those
Sweet.
guys?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Another creative mind, Craig.
There you go.
You know, seriously.
Yeah. Daryl Hammond, 1955 until. American actor and stand-up comedian and impressionist. He was a Saturday Night Live cast member from 1995 to 2009, making him one of the longest-standing actors in the show.
Tom Harzel. This guy was an American composer, arranger, again in jazz.
Yeah, interesting.
You know?
Well, I guess these are
Musician.
famous people, but they're famous for good reasons, right? For creating something cool.
And just as he says that, we come up on John Hickley Jr.
John Hinckley Jr. You know what he did, right,
Oh,
David?
yeah.
Yeah, what'd he do?
I don't know. He's on
You don't
this.
know who he is either?
I do not, man.
Oh, I'm disappointed in you guys, man. He's the guy that shot Ronald Reagan.
Oh, okay.
So there's your first person who was famous for
I don't know. What
harmful-
does it say about him?
Got his
harmful
mugshot.
reasons.
But just
He shot
that.
the president.
Yeah, he shot
Oh,
President
yeah. He
Reagan.
shot the I know.
Pronounce that one, Craig. You see this one?
Kiriak?
Jack. I'm going to go with Jack.
Yeah.
Jack.
Famous American novelist and poet, writing the famous classic On the Road. Haven't heard of that one.
Veronica Lake. Let's buzz through a couple more. Mary Todd Lincoln. Well, what's Lincoln? Is that related? Mary Todd Lincoln?
That was Lincoln's wife.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know
What's
that.
wrong with you people?
First
man?
Lady of the United States.
Yeah.
Had schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, Lincoln had it rough, huh?
Right?
Yeah.
Rufus May. British clinical psychologist, David.
Imagine that.
Yeah, it says he was famous for using his own experiences with mental illness to. And there's John Nash.
Yeah.
John Nash is the next one on the list.
Oh, this is cool. What's his name though?
Ingo Schweitzenberger.
I think I read about this one. This was a guy, famous people. Short life of Ingo. He was a German-born drummer, one of the founding members of the German power metal band Halloween. That's actually not the one I thought I read before, but
Known throughout the world for his music in the music community for his energy drumming.
Skip Spence, another guitarist in the early lineup of Quicksilver Messenger Service, and was the drummer of Jefferson Airplane's debut album. Remember those guys?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Jefferson Pilot. That was good stuff.
Gene Tierney,
Yeah.
actress.
She looks cute.
Oh, here's one. Vincent Van Gogh.
Yeah, I saw this
Wow,
when I was
right?
looking at this. I'm like,
Yeah,
really?
Vincent Van Gogh.
Most famous schizophrenic people around the world, renowned artist.
I guess you got to have something going on if you cut off your ear and send it to somebody. in
Seen
the
some
mail,
paintings,
right?
though, right?
that what
Makes
you
sense-
did?
makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah, you don't know that. Yeah, he cut off his ear, man.
Yeah.
And I think he mailed it to his ex-girlfriend or something. I'm not sure
dear.
what he did.
Wesley Willis, singer-songwriter, as a visual artist, appearing widely on TV shows as MTV, Howard Stern. In '89, he became hearing what was called demons, as was diagnosed as having paranoid schizophrenia. He was institutionalized for 2 months after his diagnosis. He often mentioned that his demons were named Heartbreaker and Nerve Wrecker and
Wow.
Mean Sucker. That would suck, right?
Like some ex-wives.
Right. That was good, kind of relief, funny. Brian Wilson, 1942. I mean, the list goes
Brian
on.
Wilson,
I mean,
Yeah, Brian Wilson's founder of the Beach
Well, that-
Boys.
yeah,
There
that's
was a movie about him, too.
and that's the one that I read. I'm glad. Yeah. So I mean, the thing is let's normalize this a little bit as the point and purpose. I mean, like, dang, man, it's something that has this sort of allure in mental health. People don't want to come to me, David, get a diagnosis because they don't want to be crazy. And I'm going to submit to you: are you getting an idea that these people that have psychotic issues as a primary point and purpose, are these people crazy? What says you?
It's just a broad definition, right? I mean, I can't do that.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, having a diagnosis is very, I have to be honest with you, and I know I'm on the outside of the profession, but it's very subjective, right? I mean,
Yep.
It's not something I can say, well, these 3 factors and you're it, right? There's multiple things.
Mm-hmm.
You said it's very complex, and to me that means subjective, right?
Right.
It's like the NFL. Was that a catch or not? So I don't know. One guy says yes, one guy says no. It's a big argument, right? But you look at these guys, and I see a lot of right brain activity, right? Creativity, right? That isn't normally a norm for us, right? We're not very creative. I mean, you look at Shakespeare, right? I mean, he had to have an English teacher that had to be pissed, I would assume, right? Like, stop speaking like that, right? So, but look who we got, right? I mean, we had some very awesome things that are not the norm, right? So, I don't know. I wouldn't say they're crazy. I would just say, hey, we tapped something. They're doing something. A lot of those are very, what we would call creative, right? And creative mindsets and music. I think that's huge.
Yeah, those are famous people, but I'm sure there's other people who are struggling.
I said, do you have infamous
in different
people?
ways who can't.
He said famous.
Infamous.
He said famous.
Well, there's
that
whatever
means famous
they
in
are.
the bad way.
But I'm saying we're making a case that here's some 20 famous people who had schizophrenia. I mean, tapping into some creative thing that other people aren't. But I'm sure there's lots of people who are struggling, who can't function, who are. I don't know. I guess I'm just making the point that perhaps it's not some creative pathway to genius.
Yeah, you're right. I see your point, and that's true because there are real factors that are going on that are causing great problems for these folks. And if they would just get their act together, they'd be like these famous people. That is not the case.
Yeah, I'm gonna make that clear.
Yeah, that is not the case. It's a real debilitating disorder and diagnosis. And I mean, when you start hearing a bit about your kid, I mean, you're going to grieve, you're going to be like upset, you're going to be like, what does this mean? Can he live? Is he going to is he going to kill somebody? And none of that stuff is really necessarily true. But again, we need to be aware and we need to treat this and we need to get, the help that really will help people be successful, but they can live a life.
How do people get help, Chris? If you think that, or if you know somebody who's hearing voices or seeing things or hallucinating, where do you go? You said that you probably weren't the first point of contact.
Well,
or maybe you are. Maybe you diagnose.
I can be. I can diagnose that sort of stuff for sure. And again, I come across this probably most commonly when I do now, in somewhat of the rare circumstances I do, where families have children that are really struggling. They're acting out in school and they've got some anger issues. They're irritable and they're not manageable. They're not making sense sometimes. And they won't tell you, by the way, that they're having any psychotic experience. You have to really kind of get in there and get some rapport developed and figure that out because they're not going to let you know this.
Is it possible that they wouldn't know?
And they're struggling, particularly as this is manifesting itself so early on in life, that, they don't even know.
Because when we're talking about seeing people that look just like...
You're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, there's my buddy.
I heard a voice in my room, man. And we're going to tell them, no, you didn't.
Well, I think hearing voices is different. If you hear a voice and nobody's there, obviously, hey, something's going on.
No,
but if in your mind you see someone sitting there, if that movie's true, and he actually saw people in physical form, or at least in his mind they were, would you even know that wasn't a real person?
You would not. Yeah, you would not until you begin figuring it out. That's why I like that. That's why I like that movie. Like I said, I mean, he really began to dawn on him when he figured out that girl never got older. That sort of clicked for him that, oh, well, wait a minute, if that's the case, then how? Because this all sort of blends in together in reality as well. So back to your question, where they go for help. I mean, I think we actually did a show on how to access care. Did we not?
We did. Yeah, we definitely
did. It's kind of referred to that show.
Okay.
Because it is the same sort of stuff.
Protocol.
Yeah, okay. You're going to go to a doctor, you're going to go to a psychiatrist, you go to a therapist, you get a diagnosis, you go to we used to go to the mental health center, but somebody's got to kind of figure out like, hey, I think I'm figuring out diagnostically what's going on here. Here's what we need to do to treat it. Sometimes you don't get treatment at all until you're like got some major problem and you land up in the hospital, because you're not safe for harming yourself or harming other people. Because people will live quite into their 20s and 30s probably. They start smoking pot. They start coping with their feelings. They don't let people really know what's going on, and they just deal with it. So they can go a while without even being identified.
You just said something there about smoking pot. Is there any evidence that drugs can kick you into a schizophrenic state?
No.
Okay.
No, not that I'm aware at all.
Not
No,
that you're
it's
aware of.
Back to the idea that your parents had sex.
Okay.
The genetic realities, the biological reality kind of clips in. This is not a traumatic brain injury where you start experiencing something, or something happened traumatically, rape in your life or something like that. Those are other things. Schizophrenia, I think I'm safe to say, is pretty clearly.
Yeah, I've been reading, or I have read about the use of psychedelics. There's a whole lot going on in the psychedelic world, and I'm not smart enough to talk about it intelligently on the show. But go look it up if you're interested. But it seems like Tim Ferriss writes about it quite a bit, and it seems like he said that he knew somebody who was playing around with mushrooms or something like that, and it did something. And I thought it was schizophrenia, but perhaps I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I actually have it on my list to do a show on it at some time, but it probably isn't going to happen anytime soon.
On psychedelics?
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
interesting.
On the Quixote trips and things like that.
Ayahuasca.
I've
shamans. And
I've had clients talk to me about it, and it's been interesting. I've had some conversations with people, and I've had some conversations with people that have done it. I don't know how I feel about it, and because I don't understand it totally. I did see a show on it that was kind of fascinating. Big point here to make with that, though. I think that this is not like, hey, take mushrooms and get better.
No, I'm not saying that at all. And people who have done these things are going to facilities where there are doctors and care. They're not.
Yeah, and
they're not eating mushrooms and hanging out at home with their. I mean, they're the people that I've read about who are using psychedelics for these kind of things are in situations where people are there to care for them and make sure they don't do anything they shouldn't do.
And people will do it kind of on their own. I wouldn't advise it by shore. They'll go
I don't
across
want anybody
seas.
to go. I
absolutely.
don't want anybody to listen to our show and say, "Oh, it's, and run out and start eating a bunch
go
of
to the salt
mushrooms
rooms.
LSD.
Salt rooms will solve it.
and this is I think the point I want to make on this. This is something that's kind of like, you'll do it once. And the idea that I saw on a show or something is that it sort of rewires the brain and the neuronic process.
Yeah, that's my understanding. So we have our brain is like a highway.
Yep, there you go.
And then we have, so most of our thoughts go down the freeway, if you will. But there's all these side roads that we never hardly access. So apparently taking these psychedelics, for whatever reason, forces you to use more of the side roads. So it opens up your brain in different places. And there's some research and evidence that once you come off the high, you continue to use those new roads, those new pathways, and that kind of thing.
Did you see the same show I saw?
Well, I mean, like I say, I've read quite a bit. I may have, but I've read about this too.
That's exactly what they were talking about.
And in some places, they're treating hard drug addictions like heroin and cocaine with psychedelics. I'm not sure how they're doing it, but there are some places. Probably not in the United States.
Oh, it's definitely not FDA approved.
Yeah, but there are places that are treating drug addiction with psychedelics. It's fascinating stuff. If you're interested, just go out and Google some of that stuff and read up on it. And these are really science-based things. These aren't some Joes.
You saw that on Joe himself, Rogan, didn't you?
Joe Rogan talks about psychedelics.
Yeah.
DMT and ayahuasca and
I
like
really
that.
don't know how I feel about it. It's you start messing around with the neuron process, and we talked about neurotransmitters. Remember?
Yeah.
We got 200 of them. We don't even got names for but 60 of them. I mean, it is fascinating stuff. But I caution anybody out there that listens to anybody,
I don't
believes
want anybody
themselves
who hears my voice to go out and do a psychedelic.
But I'm saying anybody that hears anybody kind of talking about it like definitively. Turn your brain to a big question mark.
But I will say there are scientific studies going on in accredited institutions on this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be that it is beneficial in some way.
Mm-hmm. It is fascinating. I mean, the highways. I heard the same stuff.
I mean, we have such a negative. We've been programmed that drugs of any kind are bad, You know, so I think when we hear like, oh, they're treating such and such with,
Yeah, well,
with
listen.
LSD, what are you crazy? But there could be something to it, right? I mean,
Listen, some of our medications, Abilify, Clozaril, Saphris, Latuda, those are some of the antipsychotic medications. And by the way, if you're on those, there's also off-label uses for them, and they prescribe them for other reasons. So don't freak out. I do have clients that ask me in my office, like, oh my God, he wants to prescribe me an antipsychotic medication. And I'm like, yeah, okay, it's okay. You got other reasons to take those and stuff. But, you know, some of them are, you know, historically we started learning about it with Special K and different, you know, tranquilizing medications and stuff that we were kind of using to try to help people. Because remember, this is why we got into that all in the first place. I mean, people were identifying this and struggling, man. I mean, they are so depressed and so demoralized and so struggling in their life because they have these things going on that they can't understand and they don't have life support for it. So we would give medications and help with that. I mean, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if a lobotomy ever really helped anybody. But
what is a lobotomy, man?
I actually saw a show on it. It was a horrible show. It was like destroying psychiatry. It was an awful show, but it actually did teach me what they did with lobotomies. I mean, I don't know how. Are there any kids in the car listening here? Be careful. Dude, they would actually like take instruments and basically like drill a hole up behind your eyes, and they would go in there with instruments and like, you know, I don't know, rapidly showing a fist moving in the air to like, I don't even know.
Was it taking out brain matter?
Kind of, yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I think it was helping you use some new neurons. Right? I mean, I think that was the point.
Opening up new pathways.
Some new
in your
pathways,
brain.
yeah. A little bit of Jacob Slatter going on here.
Oh man, that sounds terrible.
It was definitely. We don't do those today, but we do ECT treatments. Because by the way, this ketamine trips and stuff you're talking about. I mean,
okay, what is an ECT treatment? I don't know what that is.
Electroconvulsive therapy, and we do that still. But the point is, it's sometimes helping depression and other things like that to kind of rewire the way somebody's struggling. So we have treatment-resistant depression, and we will wire you up sometimes and do shoot mild electric shocks. I've witnessed ECT treatments up at a hospital I was working in. It was really cool. I mean, you'll see just like a toe flinch maybe and whatever, and it has some effectiveness. Long-term effectiveness is questionable for those therapists listening out there, but yeah, we actually still do electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, electric shock treatments. That's a real thing.
Wow, I didn't think that was going on.
That's a real thing.
Is it different than it used to be?
Very, yeah. It used to be like, and
They
you're
used
like,
to strap people down and just goose them. Right?
Oh yeah.
Bam!
Take a hit. Let me take a hit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. May I have another?
Mm-hmm. What kind of questions you got buzzing around? We're
Man,
doing okay, but
we pretty much covered everything that I had written down.
you were supposed to write things down, David. How'd you do?
I'm pretty good. It's all in my brain.
I think we covered most of the stuff that I had on my mind anyway. And just P.S., we were questioning what show David was on first. It was 34, Parenting and Relationships with David Shaw.
How those kids doing, man?
They're still alive.
All right.
Producing babies, so we're doing good.
That's good.
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
grandchildren you got
I have
now?
6 and one on the way, so like 6.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah. Thanks,
That's
man.
awesome.
In
That's
the
awesome.
UK, 1 out of 6 people will need treatment for mental ill health treatment during their life. 1 in 6.
Have you seen it? It's not a happy place.
At some time during their life, about 1 in 100 people will suffer an episode of schizophrenia. That's psychosis. That sounds crazy. Really?
An episode?
This is
That sounds like a phase I was talking
living
about.
with schizophrenia in. What is this website that I got this from? I just pulled it off because I thought it'd be interesting to check out. It's a website. It's just something I found online. I'm gonna qualify that. Living with schizophrenia. UK.org, facts and figures. I guess this is kind of a UK thing. That doesn't sound right to my brain. At some time during their life, about 1 in 100 people will suffer an episode of schizophrenia. I don't get that.
That's got to be true because it's on the internet.
that.
The other episode I wanted to point out was episode 23, and that was the one where we talked about how to access
Care.
mental health care.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you
so
put those
if
on
you
the show
guys
notes.
have questions about how? Yeah, I'll put
failed
those
with all
shows
that.
on the show notes too. And that way, if you have questions about how to access mental health, or if you want to hear David's story, you can go.
No, it's a good one because I think we do that a lot. We do for the veterans. We do a lot of mental health well-being.
Oh,
Right,
absolutely.
so we have a lot of conversation like that, and we have the the Veterans Crisis Hotline and Suicide Hotline and Runaway and all that stuff. So I didn't know if that was covered there, but we have a lot of that stuff we do as well.
Who we?
The veteran ministries. So
Oh.
when we go out there, we have that conversation. There's a veteran hotline and there's a suicide hotline. And there's all that kind of stuff as well that we advertise out there.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
So keeping the hot list right there, baby.
Awesome.
Give it to him.
Oh,
He's
you wanna
the,
give a
he's the
plug?
show notes guy.
You want to give a plug?
Yeah, hit it up a little bit more. We talk about.
There's a my house is the veteran house, right? So the Bible will travel gateway kind of thing. But we got a Veterans Crisis Hotline. It's it's 800-273-8255, and then there's a few others for domestic violence and some other ones. But
hit domestic violence.
So yeah, domestic violence. So domestic violence hotline is 800-799-SAFE. And so that's one as well. Then we got suicide prevention, and then runaway, and then we actually have healthfinder.gov.
People
which is a really
can
good one. Okay.
pause and rewind. So hit those numbers.
Yeah. So again, we got Veterans Crisis Line at 800-273-8255, and the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-SAFE, and I'll share that with you.
Yeah, do that. Share that with me.
And I really want to do a show on runaways and sex trafficking and stuff. I really been struggling to get a professional that's more qualified than me to talk about that particularly. But what is the runaway one? You still got it up?
Yeah, I do. So the runaway here is waiting for my phone to update while I'm sharing this text.
Schizophrenia affects men and women alike, and sufferers come from all walks of life and social backgrounds. I'll throw in that fact.
Nice plug. So the National Runaway Hotline is 1-800-RUNAWAY. So that's
Oh, you can remember that.
So yeah.
It affects all countries and all societies of the world.
So that's national,
Another
right?
plug.
So that's a USA one, but yeah, it does affect everybody. But these are just stateside numbers. But and there's healthfinder.gov. So if
you're involved in quite a few ministries that.
Yeah, and I will say,
I
would say because that's my affinity, right? I'm a veteran as well, so there's a lot of folks that have shell shock, PTSD, a lot of things that we talk about, and the stigma that Chris hit on, which is I don't want to get labeled that. I don't want that on my record. So there's a new thing now at the VA, and I go there a lot. And if you don't go to the VA, sign up for the VA, even if you don't need it and you're a veteran, sign up for it because that local VA gets dollars for it. So you're just if you don't sign up, we're losing opportunity for money for that location.
Oh, cool.
But the goal really is to let folks know there's a mental health outpatient as well at the VA. And you can get in and get out real quick. So that's maybe like a 5 to 7 day wait period to get that kind of sometimes. But yeah, so now they have a whole line now just for mental health outpatient well-being.
We've had a previous show guest that was talking about Suboxone, if you recall. She works at the VA now.
Yeah, okay. Does she really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She didn't work for the VA when she was here, right?
I don't think so. I don't know when that started or whatnot. But, I was looking at these fact sheet here, and I'm glad I caught this because we totally missed something. It's a big factor with schizophrenia. And I'll just read it. It says, schizophrenia is a killer. Sufferers have 5 to 10% chance of dying by their own hand within 10 years of a diagnosis.
How many? Say that again.
5 to 10% chance, if you're diagnosed with schizophrenia, of completing the act of suicide.
10
right?
within 10.
Around 2.5 times higher than the general population. So self-harm is a real big factor with this. And, you can just imagine the reasons. You hear this stuff and you get diagnosed and you're kind of like, oh my God, As a matter of fact, this is another good time to throw in something that I've kind of heard in my travels early on. I think it was the same. No, it wasn't the same guy, Bob Music. It was Tim. Hey, Tim. He was my first clinical administrative supervisor out of grad school. Forget Tim's last name. Holy cow. He taught me, surprisingly, listen to this, man. This fact stuck with me. It was kind of supposition, I guess. I don't know if it's research or whatever, but he helped me understand the thought. When someone gets a diagnosis like this, bipolar or schizophrenia or a major mental health diagnosis like that, he told me that it takes anywhere from 2 to 25 years. No, that's wrong. Not from 2 to 25 years. He said it takes up to 25 years to really incorporate into your brain and in your life that this is part of you. So the adjustment period,
25 years?
Yeah.
It could take that long?
Yeah, well, just again in subjective view of like working with people. He was a pretty career-long mental health, community mental health worker. He worked in the mental health centers probably most of his career. I don't know. But his experience was seeing, people that, they get this diagnosis as a 20-year-old, 22, and it's, you're 20 plus years or whatever before you're really like, okay, all right, let me manage this effectively in my life.
It could, not everybody
at all. As a matter of fact,
it could take that long.
I'm pretty hopeful that that's actually gotten better in our treatment and coverage in the mental health system. So I'd really be curious. I have no way of doing it, but Tim, if you're out there, give me a call and let me know if you still think that, if it's gotten better or not. I'd like to think that it has, but suicide is a major concern with these guys and gals.
That's big because as far as World Health Organization, obviously, and then here we have the United States organizations. Is that suicide's huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of numbers, right? I mean,
yeah,
I can't remember the last numbers. I feel bad about it, but I think it was some in the neighborhood of 180, right? And it's large numbers. And so if obviously schizophrenia is 2 times that, right? So obviously you can say that inside that number, that's a large number of folks that
they're really affected by it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we should really pour time and energy into.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it makes me think, are there things like, maybe folks who don't want to get the mental health check mark that says I have a problem? Is there like, support groups outside that, right?
There probably are. I'm ignorant as
Okay.
to it. I'll be honest with you. You caught me completely flat-footed on that, and I'll be honest about it.
Because I think
I got nothing.
I think there's that stair step, right, to get in and talk to a few people, and you start getting in that category of like other folks have the same problem, so you don't feel so isolated.
Yeah, it's
right?
huge.
And I was like, oh, there's a club of us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? And then you're like, okay, then here's how I deal with it, right? I'm thinking about people who've lost a loved one, right? And there's a group for that.
Support groups are a
Right?
huge factor in being well, so that you're not alone and that you can be with other people that are understanding and dealing with it. It's funny because as you caught me flat-footed, I kind of remember when I was in West Virginia, there was a program where a lot of psychosis-afflicted people would be together. I don't know what it was called, but I remember referring to it actually. It's when I was doing my crisis work. But now that's been so long ago, I have no idea. Listen, this is interesting. Schizophrenia is not caused by poor parenting or over-concerned mothers, nor is it caused by adversity in childhood. Just read that to give you some sort of cred on whatever I found. I mean, I think there's a lot of legitimacy in these facts and figures lists that we got listed on our site. And the next one is interesting. I highlighted, says episodes of schizophrenia are often triggered by environmental factors, such as stress, and by hormonal changes, such as are associated with puberty, childbirth, and menopause. And I guess the thing that I would point out there is, there's a lot of chemical stuff going on with that. So, David, to your point of like, is this, how did you put it, in and out of it, or
Phase.
phase in and out and all? Anytime that you have, long ago, Craig, I talked about the tale of 2 tapes. There's real biological factors and there's real social and emotional factors. Well, you have biological factors for sure with this. But that's going to interact with the social and emotional factors, right? You got a major stressful time period in your life. Boom, you're going to be more likely to have a struggle with whatever mental health condition you have. That's totally where therapy comes in, by the way. Going back to treatment, what do? Well, you're managing life. Anytime you got major stress, people can decompensate. And when your system's already decompensated in a certain way, you're going to go into, maybe you think of it, David, as a phase, but it's really going to go into a triggering of what your biology is kind of set up to do anyway. So interesting, during puberty, childbirth, and menopause, they cite here, well, we know there's a lot of chemical stuff going on during puberty, which is interestingly why it probably manifests at that typical age.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned menopause, right? I mean, that's really outside the age range, isn't it?
Episodes of schizophrenia, meaning when somebody has schizophrenia kind of goes into a decompensated state before it kind of gets better and relaxes. Because you kind of, you're more psychotic and more struggling at some points than at others. It kind of abates and then it comes back. And, so no, we're probably not talking about that. Yeah, that late of an onset would be very rare.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be very, very rare to have an onset at that point. There's now some evidence that using street drugs, especially cannabis, may increase your chances of suffering an episode of schizophrenia, but the picture is still not clear. That's what it says. I don't know. About 25% of people who suffer an episode of schizophrenia will go on to recover completely without any future problems in the future. Now, that to me doesn't sound like schizophrenia. It sounds like brief psychotic episode and some other things going on, but I don't know, Craig. What'd you get? What are you thinking? We did a good job with the diagnostic show, you think?
I hope so, man. The listener will tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give us some feedback and tell us what you think out there, guys. What do you think, David? You got a better understanding of something that's really a mystery, I think, to a lot of people?
Yeah, I think I do. I'm always a practical person trying to put a finger on it, right? So yeah, I'm actually going to take some of this, out to the field with me, if you will.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
When I talk to some folks and say, what am I realizing? What am I noticing? What am I fingerprinting? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm encouraged by this.
Well, that's cool.
This helps.
Yeah, that's neat that you could take that to some of the things that you do out there with folks, man.
Right. And and obviously I'm calling you next. So, because the goal is for me to recognize one thing, but it doesn't mean it's real, right? So I got to get a professional involved. But, for me to help recognize that while I'm talking to people, that could be very big.
Mm-hmm. 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 So I'll tell you where we're going next. I got an interesting thing that's going to come next, man. And I'm kind of excited about it. And I'll tell you why after you take us out of here, maybe, Craig.
Okay, man. ThroughItTherapistized.com is where you can find out more about the show. We've got individual entries for each show. You can stream right off the website, or you can find us now on just about any podcast platform. We also release the podcast on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you're following our pages there or subscribe to our channel, you'll get updates when we release shows. We're doing shorter shows on Mondays. We're pulling out little segments of shows to kind of put some useful information out there in a 10 to 15 minute format. And hopefully that's going to help a lot of people out that don't have time to listen to a full show. And,
who wouldn't have time to listen to that?
Even hearing things over and over again. Sometimes you pick up new things when you hear things twice.
Yeah,
so
actually, that's one of the reasons why I like it a lot, Craig. To be honest with you, I like listening to them because I do pick some things out, particularly when
I do too.
We do the neurology one.
I played the retirement episode we did for my mother today when she was here.
Yeah,
she's retired, and I was asking her if she ever thought about going back to work. And she said, yeah, she thinks about it every now and then.
And you popped it on for her?
And I let her listen to it.
That was neat. Yeah,
so,
neat.
It's, I listen to those things sometimes too. You can also find links to Facebook and Instagram on our website. And you can send us messages there anonymously, or you can plug in your name and email address if you want to get a response. We never do share those names on the show unless you tell us we can. We don't want to betray anybody's trust, asking a potentially serious question on there. And sign up for the email list. There's an email list. Sign up on the front page of that site. And I'd love to be able to send you some emails about show updates and those kind of things. And tell your friends, man. Word of mouth is the best way to get the word out. And Chris and I want to spread the word about mental health and mental health issues. And you can help us do that. All right, man.
So it's interesting, man. I was just reading my newspaper, a little old Gastonia Gazette, man. And I was pulling out all kinds of, Craig, I had 7 or 8 different current events of articles that I was just checking out. I kept on hitting another one and another one and another one. I was like, man, this is amazing. So we're going to have a hodgepodge a little bit of current events next time that I want to go through. And it's just a description of in my mind,
current events.
Commonly we come across this in our just regular everyday life. And in reading one newspaper article, how many different little hits that were significantly a part of mental health. So it's going to be a fun little hodgepodge. But here's the big catch. And I was talking to a buddy of mine about this. The show that we just did on service dogs, right?
Yeah.
Right. So there was a podcast that I listened to, and oh man, I got to think about how I want to deal with it. But they totally debunked what we came up with. I was fired up about it, man.
About what?
Service dogs are debunked.
Yeah. How
yeah.
so?
Well, they didn't find any science about it that legitimized service dogs. And that's one of the articles that I found in there. So we're going to cover service dogs a little bit and how it's used in community, which was a really cool way that this article pointed out they're using service dogs with kids. But I'll just leave that as a teaser. But yeah, man, they totally. I was
well, I
worked
don't care
up about it, man.
I don't care if there's science or not. We know that service dogs are helping people.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this podcast, you ought to can it.
Well, no, I'm not going to can it, but I really want to kind of contact them.
Well, you talked about how they debunk personality profiles, and there was a skeptic show.
That was a different one.
A skeptic show.
That was actually a totally different one.
Okay.
Be honest with you. Yeah.
But it's good to
Yeah.
have those. You need those, right?
You do.
Just because there's not science behind some things doesn't mean it's not true.
Well, it means that we need science actually
It means
about
we
it.
need to look into it deeper.
Exactly, and we're going to talk about that when we talk about that with the current events, because it kind of fired me up. And the fact is, they didn't talk about how service dogs are trained at all, and that's a big factor. Because if you remember talking to John and Joy, like the training of these things. And they made the point on the show, and it was a good show, by the way, because they really landed on the fact that we need more science, and that's why it was debunked.
Yeah.
So I have to listen to it again to find out how angry I should be about it. But
Well-
it was really interesting the way they landed.
Maybe it's true there's no science behind the thing, but we saw Bob
Not
get
enough,
up when
Yeah.
Joy was needing to get out of there.
Witnessed it.
Back in the 1800s or something like that, when we did surgery on people back in those days, there was no sanitation or whatever, and so people would get infections and gangrene and die from surgeries. It was really a bad thing, right? So this guy theorized that there were these little small microorganisms, whatever you call them, I'm not sure what you call them, germs, if you will, that we couldn't see, that would get into wounds and cause infections.
Oh,
and stuff
yeah.
like that. They ran this guy out of the industry, right?
Yeah.
Later on, we found microscopes or whatever and realized that the guy was right the whole time.
Right.
Where did you
right.
see that?
They
I
just
watched
couldn't.
that.
I'll look that up. But they couldn't. There was just no science to see the things, the germs
Yeah.
that were infecting people at the time, and the guy was ridiculed.
Yeah.
Turns out he was right the whole time. So the point of me saying that is just because these guys say there's no science behind it doesn't mean it's not true.
They didn't
Yeah.
find science behind it. See, that's the biggest key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right? You didn't find science. I don't disagree. Probably didn't. I don't know yet. We haven't
Right.
figured out how to do it yet.
Yeah.
I'd like landing a rocket. I didn't think we'd do that in my lifetime, but there we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff. We'll talk more
know
about
what?
it.
And the whole intuition thing, it's just I think humans have intuition to some level, just not as much as maybe an animal does.
Mhm.
It's just
Well, they have
but
also
those are-
sensory experience.
But those are things
that's
we
different
can't.
than
Yeah, absolutely. Those are just things we can't study.
And they do great things with the veterans that you work with, Dave. I mean, there's service dogs and veterans are getting a lot of play, and it's really super cool. We got to get out of here, man. Thanks.
We're going to get out of here. I'm just going to say something. That's,
Okay, go.
So, we're going to do this thing on current events, right? So, I have been watching a little bit of news. I've said several times on the show that I've quit watching the news just because it's negative and fear mongering. But when this Mueller report came out, I started paying a little bit more attention to the news, right? And I've just got to say, Chris, there is a mental health crisis in politics, man. There is a mental health crisis in politics. So I think talking about current events might be a pretty interesting show.
So it's so.
Okay.
Yes, it is so. David, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I enjoyed that. That was fun.
Yeah,
We
man,
had
I
to do
enjoyed it.
again.
I'm glad you
Very
came
awesome,
by.
guys. Thank you.
Pop up on the window anytime, man.
I think so. I think I will. I like that window.
We'll see you guys next week. Have a great week.